So Dr. Saleeby, why did you even get into this holistic type of medicine?
Well, my career spans, traditional mainstream medicine, what we call allopathic medicine. That was my training from medical school and residency. And then almost 20 years in the emergency room doing emergency medicine and urgent care. And it was during that time that I realized, we were very good at doing acute injury stuff, gunshot wounds, lacerations, broken bones, dislocated shoulders. We have an amazing triage system and EMS that can respond and get people, even acute heart attacks, from the house to the ambulance ride to the cath lab can be as short as 8 minutes. And there's some, amazing things they can do to save a life.
Yeah.
Where we seem to have gone wrong is how we treat chronic illness. That's diabetes, hypertension, renal failure, liver failure. And it's like a revolving door. When I used to work on a weekend, I would see the same Jim. And I'd say, hey, Jim, your fluid overload will diurese you and we'll get you home in about 8 hours. And then when he's leaving, we're like, okay, see you next weekend, because the primary care doctors were kind of dropping the ball. They wouldn't discuss nutrition and diet and salt. They talked about salt intake for like 2 seconds. And then it was just pharma driven. They were just prescribing drug after drug after drug, and people were on 8, 10, 12 medications. I had one the other day was on 20 medications. So, and they don't fix the problem per se. They don't cure. They just put a patch on a problem. So after seeing that day in and day out for a number of years, I changed my course in the late 1990s to pursue a tract of educating myself in what else was out there. And it was what we called integrative medicine or holistic, taking care of the whole body, borrowing from traditional medical cultures like Ayurvedic medicine and traditional Chinese medicine. These have been around for 3,000-4,000 years. They got to be doing something right? Maybe they don't have the medical journals to back up what they say, but our current allopathic system is too heavily reliant on high-powered journals for directing guidelines. And unfortunately, guidelines can be 17 to 20 years old without being revised. And now we're finding out that some of our top journals, like the Lancet, New England Journal, JAMA, have been falsifying what they've published. So that throws a wrench into what good doctors around the country are trying to do for their patients. So I departed from that kind of mainstream track for the alternative track. We would call functional medicine right now. We look for deep cause, root cause for problems. And I retired from the ER in 2012, and I've been doing this full time now.
Wow. And so when you see people, I mean, you talked about the gentleman with 20 medications, that's got to be a hard thing for the patient. That we are habitual, we get stuck in these patterns, and well, I've seen this doctor and this doctor has me on this, but they can't probably tell you exactly why they're taking something. And that can be very intimidating for the thought of someone coming off of a medication that they've habitually grown accustomed to taking. So how do you even start to dissect that? And what's the real method of that?
Sure. Well, to make a convert out of that person, they have to be open-minded and be willing to listen. I mean, you can lead a horse to water, but you necessarily can't get them to drink. So we can put it on the table. Our consultations are usually anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half, depending on the complexity. Somebody with polypharmacy, that's too many meds, usually more than 3 to 5 medications. That can take a whole hour just discussing why they're on it, what those medicines are supposed to do, their adverse side effects, and then their drug-drug interactions. And we have help from cloud-based calculators and computers that will generate a report on how these drugs interact with one another or with your genetics. So then you can't just stop them cold turkey. I mean, some medications may take a year to come off of. Some may require a slow titer where you reduce the dose over months and months. Everyone's a little different. Some require, you can get off in maybe 30 days, and some require 6 months to even a year. So on that polypharmacy aspect, we have to focus and guide our patients. And again, it depends on how open they are to that, whether they embrace it or not. The other things we educate our patients on: nutrition, some selected dietary supplements to fill in some holes. Most of the time they come to us and they have very minimal lab work done by their primaries. And we fill in the holes by doing some more what they would call esoteric tests, but they're very important and often missed and very valuable. And just fixing those minor things can be a game changer for some people.
Yeah, and I remember when I was still in the older traditional medicine, when I would go in and I'd want to be proactive and I'd say, hey, I'd like to get every blood test possible. And it was always, I had to sell or convince the doctor to write the prescriptions for the blood. And it was the typical, hey, you know, your insurance is probably not going to cover this. And what I was trying to understand was, forget about the insurance for a minute. Let's get a really good look at what's going on inside of me so that I can get the best information possible. So when people come to see you for the first time, because if they've never done blood testing, I think they get a little freaked out by it. But what is the first step that you need to learn? Like, what is the first step a patient would do for you to get the information that you need to properly advise them?
Right. Well, first of all, the first part is the education about insurance and fee for service or cash practices. Sometimes they're called DPC, direct primary care. They're either membership or you pay as you go. And the difference is that in the initial first 6 months, you might be paying out a little bit more than you would if you had insurance. But if you look at projections for a 3-year or 5-year or 10-year, then the savings are incredible.
Yeah.
If you go to a functional medicine doctor and get put on a preventive medicine tract, your first outlay of capital, your capital investment, I tell people investing in your own health might be a little bit larger than you would in the first year of paying insurance premiums and paying your copay at the office. But then if you look beyond that at the 3, 5, 10-year, then you're going to save a lot of money in being in the hospital, buying expensive prescriptions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it works out where we teach our patients to be self-sufficient, and they can actually know what to do in a pinch. If they get sick, they'll know what to go for, and they don't necessarily need prescription drugs.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing we want to do. The second is a very detailed, what we call functional medicine intake, where we ask certain questions that they'll never have been asked before. Things like, were you C-section or were you vaginal delivery? Were you breastfed or bottle fed? Have you had a heavy dose of antibiotics as a child? Were you bit by a tick? Where did you live for more than 6 months at a time? These are things that part of history that make a big difference about what types of tests we would order. So there's the basic foundational functional medicine testing, but functional medicine testing, there are literally thousands of tests to run on people, and you don't want to get into the habit of over-testing folks. So we use our ears and all the gray and white matter in between to kind of sort out and vet out what they need. And then sometimes we do it in stages. We have, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of testing. And then based on their history and some of their complaints, we kind of direct our testing order, how we order our tests.
Yeah. And then once the tests come back in, what happens next on the consultation side? Because I think those reports, you see them and it's like reading a different language.
Yeah, so it can be kind of daunting, and some of them are color coded. And if a patient were to see their report without understanding what they were, and they might see a lot of red and yellow, they might freak out. You're right. So a lot of times we shelter them from that anxiety attack by having them come in the office. Well, we do a lot of telemedicine, so we can screen share and show them their reports, and live, line by line, while they're there, we go through each lab, why we did it, what it means, and hey, sometimes that red mark or that high reading is not that bad. And there are other things, nuances they might miss, like they might miss the fact that some of their renal or kidney studies might show the fact that they're chronically dehydrated. You might miss that.
Yeah.
Or subtleties in their thyroid function tests that will let us know that they have functional hypothyroidism, but to the family medicine doctor, they would say, oh, that's normal.
Yeah.
So we look at different reference ranges, and we look at the reports in a little bit different way.
Yeah. So there's great quotes as an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so I justify that to myself when I'm in, because I consider it an investment, investing in the research so that I buy the right supplementation. I use the right supplementation. I'm a very habitual person. So I like to take my supplements that you've prescribed like clockwork. But if there's someone out there that they still are thinking, okay, wait a minute, this is a little woo-woo, this is a little goofy, and they're not quite ready to start, but they know inside they need to get a little healthier.
Mhm.
What do you recommend of things that people could do literally after they stop watching this to start making that turn towards a healthier lifestyle? What are some real good fundamentals?
Yeah, so our practice is we take on some really complicated patients, and you know, in the beginning, you know, pre-COVID, we had a lot of thyroid and hormone and a few Lyme patients here and there, but now since the advent of the COVID era, we call it the COVID era of medicine, the complexity of our patients is extremely high. So some folks would be, you know, way down on the waiting list to get in if they're just coming in for simple preventive medicine. So there are naturopathic doctors, there are some functional medicine, chiropractic doctors that can put you on the path to good health. And it has to do with exercise and diet. That's 90% of it right there.
Yeah.
You don't have to buy expensive, fancy vitamins or do detoxing like a 10-day or $21, 21-day detox. You should be detoxing every day. So a healthy diet of organic, fresh, leafy greens, or as organic as you can foods, from everything from poultry to beef, grass-fed, let's say, and grass-finished, all the way up to your vegetables and fruits. That's key. Also, safe seafood, nothing that's been farm-raised, really. Wild-caught stuff is preferable. And there's no set diet for any particular group of people. You can't just say, oh, everyone needs to go keto or carnivore diet or the Ornish diet or the Mediterranean green diet. That's sort of fundamentally something that we would recommend to people after a couple of visits.
Yeah.
But, you know, keeping your diet clean, avoiding sort of the SAD, standard American diet of fast food, soda pop, and all that kind of stuff, and high sugars and high processed foods is a start.
Yeah.
And then mild to moderate exercise, whether it's, you know, I recommend doing a number of different things, not just stick to, let's say, just running.
Yeah.
You know, run, bike, swim, do some weight resistance training, mix it up a little bit so you don't get overuse injuries on some of your joints. And then, you know, things like photobiomodulation, getting out in the sun is helpful, making your vitamin D. And there's something called PBM, photobiomodulation, which actually recharges your batteries. Earthing or grounding, that's where you take off your socks and shoes and you plant your feet in damp grass or damp sand at the beach. And you do that for 15 minutes. And it's like your electron transport, you're pulling electrons from the earth into your body to kind of recharge your batteries. So there's a lot of things people can do that are for free. You don't have to buy an expensive near infrared sauna of $4,000 or $5,000. You can just go out in the sun during certain parts of the day that are safe. And get the same effect.
Yeah. Some people get scared about the sun, and I think that there's a counter message sometimes, even with dermatologists, and I know that we want to really avoid that stuff. But what is, if I wanted to go out knowing that we're not quite in South Carolina where we are, not quite in the Sun Belt, if I understand it correctly, what are those safe times, and what would you do? Would you go 15 minutes without sunscreen and apply?
Yeah. So the sunblocks, actually, some of the sunscreens are pretty toxic. They have certain chemicals in there, phthalates and oxybutylene and things like that that are toxic to our bodies. So slathering that on can be more harmful than, than some direct sunlight. So pick your sunblocks SPF of 15 or better, but make me as organic or natural as possible. If you're going out in the sun high noon, then yes, you need some sunblock to protect your skin against photoaging and some skin cancers. But if you're dawn and dusk, when the sun is about 15 degrees in the sky, so almost when it's kind of reddish in color, the atmosphere will filter out some of the ultraviolet A and B and leave you with near infrared. So near infrared actually can penetrate your clothes. You don't have to go out naked. Go out with fully clothed, and it'll penetrate through your clothing up into 9 inches into your body.
Wow.
And you can get an expensive near infrared sauna, but you don't need to. So 15 minutes in the sun, facing that sun, you'll make some vitamin D. You'll get some photobiomodulation. You'll take in that healthy near infrared light, which does some amazing things. And hey, while you're out there in the at the sunset or sunrise, take your shoes and socks off. It's the advent of the rubberized soles that have disconnected us from our planet. And there is a connection. There is some health benefits of walking around barefoot or in contact with earth and soil, not concrete or asphalt or any synthetic plastics or vinyls will block that. So you have to have, good contact with the earth. So those are the things that you can do are totally free. As far as nutraceuticals or dietary supplements, that's very individualized. We recommend a full-on visit with us or a naturopath to go over what you may need so you're not wasting your money, and also the quality. Most of the over-the-counter products that are sold by big retail centers, of course, they're profit-driven, so they don't necessarily have the best. And in some cases, some of the products, let's say fish oil, are notoriously bad. 90% of the fish oil out there really is not good for you. And some of the other products don't actually have what's really on the label. So there are some companies that vet it out. They require independent laboratory testing to get the quality, and then they tend to be a little bit more expensive, but good in, good out, good outcomes. So
that's right. And so when people come in, I'm sure that education component, they don't realize that the things, and you mentioned the sunscreen. And it took me a while for this epiphany. It seems pretty basic now, but it took me a while that the products that I put on my skin, and I think about it also just for my little girls and my wife, I feel like women, unfortunately, have way more products than guys do, right? But how do you select the right things to actually put on your skin? Because it seems that there are so many things out there that really aren't good for you.
Right. So it's been calculated that the average female in America puts anywhere from 150 to 190 different kinds of chemicals on their body every morning in the forms of, shampoos and conditioners. Just read the label. I don't know what half those ingredients are in there for. It does make sense, but some of them are very toxic. Same thing with the applications of cosmetics on their face, lipstick, even cologne and perfumes. The FDA took out a product that was considered natural. It came from a tree, but it was carcinogenic. Yeah. So that has been pulled out from most colognes. Unfortunately for the perfume industry, that was one of the main sources of a particular fragrance that they would like. Yeah. So you just have to be careful. And even some that report themselves as being very organic and healthy cosmetics, you have to really look at them closely, ask for the independent laboratory analysis of their products, and make sure they're not adulterated. And also that they're telling the truth about their products, because sometimes they stretch the truth a little bit. Yeah. So the best thing is, go natural. And I would personally have a personal philosophy about that, as well as what we inject into our bodies. So the big thing is, Botox and fillers, and some of those, botulism toxin is a very, very potent toxin. It can kill you. And if it's used for medical purposes, such as like migraine headache or interstitial cystitis, I don't have a problem with that. But the wanton, wholesale use of Botox and fillers, especially in young women, I find a dangerous path to take.
Yeah. And so are there just some hidden things lurking in people's homes that they just would never even have thought of? I know that we've got this huge mold and mildew thing that's
Right.
going on. Unfortunately, I've had some personal friends that have had mold toxicity in
Right.
what they call new homes, because they didn't realize that everything wasn't new. Like maybe the components were new, but the
Right.
ductwork wasn't new. But if you had to give anybody, be on the lookout for this big monster in your life,
Yeah.
what would it be?
So yeah, so with the environment, the house, the car, your workplace, mold, there's two aspects. There's mold allergy, which is a true IgE related allergy reaction to mold spores. And then there's mycotoxin illness, and that's basically the byproducts of mold are mycotoxins that are very resistant to breaking down or to cleaning, and they will go through you. They'll go through an animal to get to you, and I'll explain that in a minute. But they can be things like black mold or other kinds of molds that are hidden in your home behind sheetrock. It only takes 4 hours to develop a mold problem after water damage. So you can have a brand new build, brand new house, nobody's ever lived in it. You moved in, there's a bad storm, and there's a leaky roof. And that leaky roof can cause water damage in the sheetrock that you can't see. And within 4 days, you have a mold problem, which may affect your health.
Wow.
So there's that sort of environmental mold, and it's not just limited to the home. It's also in your car if you have a water damaged vehicle, or your workplace, or schools for kids, and ballet schools and gymnastic locker rooms are notorious. So you'd have to get a certified mold inspector to come and do a very thorough mold inspection to make sure you're safe. The other way you can get mold toxicity are through mycotoxins that come through our food. So grains and dairy products are notorious for harboring certain molds and yeasts. And then you have the feeding lots in big agribusiness. You have big lots where they use moldy corn. So corn is one of the most moldy foods. Coffee, by the way, is another one people don't think about.
You broke my heart with that one.
Yeah. So certain countries have certain restrictions. The United States doesn't have that many restrictions on importation of moldy coffee, but grains like wheat and barley and corn. So the corn in the feeding lots, if it gets moldy, well, the pigs and the cows and the chickens eat that, and then those mycotoxins go into their meat. And even if you were to fry it or boil it or bake it or grill it, you're not going to destroy those mycotoxins. And then when you eat that food, it's inside you. So you can either eat some corn chips or some bread that's got mold in it or mycotoxins in it, or you can eat animal meat, like chicken wings or a hamburger, and it has those mycotoxins in it. And we can test for that using urine tests where people pass it through their urine, and we can then determine how toxic they are.
Yeah. And so this can all be so overwhelming and intimidating for people. But you mentioned something earlier that I thought was interesting about daily detox. Like what is a reasonable daily detox for any one person to do?
So it should be a daily thing. You shouldn't just do a 10-day or 21-day detox. I think that's kind of fluff, and I don't know there's that much science behind it. If you've got a good functioning liver and good functioning kidneys, you can do a daily, we call it LAMPs, lifestyle modifications, which have an effect, a molecular effect or a molecular pattern. And things like organic green leafy vegetables. You got to be careful with kale. Regular kale is one of the most pesticide, most sprayed crops on the planet. So you want organic kale. You also want to make sure you wash and clean so you don't introduce any pathogens like Campylobacter or E. coli 0157, which is very toxic. So make sure you wash your vegetables and fruits and lettuce and all that before you consume them, especially if they're raw. So kale and spinach, baby spinach, regular spinach, as long as they're organic, You can make smoothies or you can eat them raw. Organic fruits and vegetables, spirulina or chlorella or like very primitive foods. So you can add like a spirulina powder to a smoothie drink. That's a daily, or you can get sun chlorella tablets and take 2 500 milligram tablets of that every morning. And that's a natural detox that kind of binds and pulls out heavy metals and toxins from your system. There are fancier ways, using certain clay binders or things like activated charcoal, but really under the direction of a clinician, because you can get in trouble with those if you don't do them right.
Yeah.
Those are ways to detox your body. But then again, you don't want to be putting bad stuff in. So the first step is avoidance of bad stuff, bad food, processed food, chemicals, things like that, heavy metals in your exposure is the first step. And then the second step is gently detoxifying. Another good detoxifier is vitamin C. So is selenium and iodine and a few other things. So it gets kind of complicated, and it's better to not just do it yourself. It's better to get some advice.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that because I am on many levels of my life, I'm very much do it myselfer, but I find that you can get yourself in trouble taking the wrong type of supplements if you don't have some guidance on there. So if people are outside of the Charleston area, and I know that you're not only in Charleston, you're also in Myrtle Beach. If they're outside of our area, but they want to get started, what would you recommend aside from finding a good functional medicine doctor? Is there a resource that they could go, a trusted website where they could find some medical practitioners that could be relied upon?
Yes, there are a couple. Well, first of all, my center, we have 5 nurse practitioners and PAs that work with us. We are licensed in both North and South Carolina. We do at least 50% telemedicine. So we have some remote patients within those states that, like in the upstate of South Carolina, that will do a telemed. They come in maybe once a year in person, if that. We also are parts of organizations that can see patients outside of the 2 states. So we see patients all over. But there are some resources. So the IFM, the Institute for Functional Medicine, so ifm.org.
All right.
They have a physician finder process. You type in your zip code and you get the ones that are certified or in that organization. The other organization is A4M, the number 4 and the letter M.
Okay.
Is the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And they also have a physician finder. And lastly, and the one I'm mostly involved with now is the FLCCC. They started out as the Frontline COVID Critical Care Doctors Alliance, and now they're branching out into things like metabolic disorders. They just put a cancer manuscript out, and they're working on one for mental health. So they're branching out to try to cover the holes in our allopathic system that need a lot of help. And this organization, so it's flccc.net, and you can find physicians near you.
Okay, well, I'll put all those links in the show notes so that people will be able to find that easily. But just go back to what you said, North and South Carolina. So if someone viewing this is in the state of North or South Carolina, what's the best way for them to reach out to you to see if it's a good fit for them to start?
Sure, a couple of ways. Best is through our website. It's Carolina Holistic Medicine. That's holistic with an H, carolinaholisticmedicine.com. Or we do have a toll-free number. It's 800-965-8482. And we have a staff of several nurses that help onboard patients.
Great. Well, I'll put that in the notes as well. And this has been super helpful. To be quite honest, I could talk about this stuff all day long. One of my favorite activities is to get my blood report back and to come in for the consultation and go through that with you. I find that to be just a lot of fun because I like to improve. And then I also find that my eyes are opened about things that I've overlooked and didn't know that. And I think the best way to stay healthy is to stay ahead of it. I think you would agree. So I appreciate everything that you've done for me personally. We've got a lot of great other videos after this, guys, if you want to take a look, just how to get an extra edge. And personally, my book, I love it. I'll have to make sure you have a copy, Dr. Saleeby, but it's got a little fitness calendar in there, just because we're creatures of habit. And if we don't move past and get a momentum, it's really hard to get healthy. So I'll put all this here. Thanks for being here. I certainly appreciate your time. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Dave.